And welcome to Dear Jane. I am your host, Scott Baker. Thank you for tuning in today. This episode of Dear Jane is brought to you by Cogency Strategic. Lots of congressional or constitutional battles coming up this year in about 12 states where they're going to try to codify abortion into state constitutions. We have to win these battles. The folks at Cogency Strategic are singularly focused on winning these battles for life. They are of one mind. They're one-track mind. So make sure you check them out. Cogency Strategic. They want to help you win your battle for life. So welcome to the show, Josh Brahm with the Equal Rights Institute. Glad that you're joining us here today, Josh. I want to start out with a true or false question.
Okay.
True or false? It is impossible to get a pro-choice person to see that abortion is wrong.
Oh, super false. Demonstrably false.
See, I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
Tell
me why.
Well, the pro-choice people that I know,
yeah,
are hard, and they don't even want to listen. They don't even want to have the conversation, so I don't even have the chance to try to convince them.
Yeah. Well, I think that happens a lot to pro-life people. I think there are pro-life people that's like that they want to talk about this, but then it's hard to get into those conversations. And there's like cultural and kind of just like social dynamic barriers there, and sometimes power dynamics depending on who you're talking to. But I also want pro-life people to kind of keep in mind, like, sometimes people might not want to talk to you because of something about you. Like, there are pro-life people who have built up sort of a bad reputation among their pro-choice friends of being, maybe obnoxious or always kind of demeaning pro-choice people or whatever in the way that they post. So I always say, like, watch what you post, because your pro-choice friends, hopefully you have pro-choice friends, but if you have them, then they're watching. And those, the things that you say will have a long ripple effect, we have found.
So it starts with your attitude. So you have to have like an open posture. What's a good way? I mean, I guess the subject just sort of comes up organically. Is that the deal? Or should you proactively bring it up?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I'm still trying to figure out exactly what is going to be the best way, because sort of everything changed when Roe was overturned with Dobbs. The dynamic between pro-life and pro-choice people has changed. And we were saying, even before that, predicting what would happen, like, this is going to be the hardest time for pro-life and pro-choice people to have conversations, because pro-choice people are going to feel like they got backed into the corner of a trap. They feel terrified. They feel furious. And that makes conversations harder. That doesn't take a genius like anyone who's married. No, that is better to have conversations when we can kind of be calm and collected and open-minded and like open to seeing the other person's view. And so, yes, I encourage pro-life people to go into the conversation with an open posture, being open-minded and actually open-minded. And this is a little bit controversial. There are some pro-life people, especially Christians, who feel uncomfortable with this idea because they think that it means being wishy-washy. They think it's just like, I cannot tell you how many times I've had quoted to me, "Don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out." It's like, I know, I've heard the quote, and it's not helpful, because when I say be open-minded, that means be open to the possibility that you're wrong about things. And if we want pro-choice people to be open-minded, then we ought to do that in return. And when it happens, when you're able to demonstrate how open-minded you are, it is one of the most powerful ways to get a pro-choice person to talk to you over a long period of time.
Wait, but if I know I'm not wrong about the life issue, how do I do that?
So I actually believe, and this is where it gets controversial, I actually believe that pro-life people should be open-minded too. I think you should be open-minded about most things. I don't think that you should be open-minded about your own existence. I don't think that you should be open-minded about 2 + 2 being 4 in a base 10 system. But I think most things, like most of my political views, for example, and even my religious views, I hold with an open hand. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have any confidence, because basically for every topic, there is a spectrum of confidence for me, on how confident I am about being right. And there's a lot of political topics that I would be in like the 40 to 70% camp. Like I haven't earned confidence if I haven't read and thought about the smartest people on both sides as opposed to just the side that I grew up with or the side that I listen to all the time on TV. And so if we can show people that we are actually open-minded, like if we're right, we don't have to be afraid of it. We don't have to be afraid of the truth.
Okay, I'm with you, and I'm of like mind with you because I had this
Nice.
conversation recently with someone. I have
Oh,
noticed as I get older, I used to be, when I was younger, I was hardcore conservative on everything. I've
yep.
noticed as I get older, I've gotten to the point where I can say, you know what, I can see how reasonable people can disagree on a wide range of issues. Reasonable,
That's great.
it's reasonable to disagree on tax policy or on transportation, or I get that. Even if you don't
Yeah.
you don't have my position on defense, I can see how you could. But boy,
Yes.
abortion. Hmm. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't.
So,
Get, I
so
can't
it's
get there.
interesting. Yeah. So sometimes what is helpful if when people want to try to like invest and grow in this area, a lot of times the most helpful thing to do is to go looking for people who are really intelligent on the other side. Most pro-life people have not read David Boonin or Judith Jarvis Thompson or Michael Tooley or Peter Singer. Like there's a lot of like really, really thoughtful, smart pro-choice people. These are not dumb people. Now, sometimes like, you're going to disagree with their views, and there's going to be some reason why you disagree with their views. You know, if you're a Judith Jarvis Thompson person, then you probably are more of a bodily autonomy-based person who just thinks that even if abortion is killing, no one should be forced to have their bodies hooked up to people. And if you're more of like let's say a Michael Tooley or Peter Singer type thing, you probably don't think that the unborn is a person like you or me because of something like brain activity, something like the belief that to be a valuable person, you need to be sentient or self-aware or something like that. So it's hard for people to believe sometimes if you haven't ever had a chance to talk to a thoughtful pro-choice person. But I have talked to a lot of very smart pro-choice people. I've also talked to some dumb pro-life people. Like there's dumb and smart people on both sides of every topic. I am more concerned with trying to help my side to become more intellectually virtuous, to also be more persuasive. There are some pro-life arguments that are more persuasive than others.
Yeah.
And so we want to be as effective as we possibly can, especially given how hard it is in a post-Dobbs environment. So it's kind of like, don't make this any harder than it needs to be. Like, if anything, we should be in boot camp. I've been talking about Band of Brothers a lot for the last year. Have you seen Band of Brothers? You know what?
I just got done watching it about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's awesome. How great is it? Okay,
Yes.
Good. You're going to hopefully you'll join those of us that watch it about annually. It is fantastic and it doesn't get old. Okay, so for those who don't know, and I'll do this quickly, but Band of Brothers, it's a historical series that takes place following one of the first paratroop companies. World War II is the first time that we actually sent soldiers out of planes with parachutes, like behind enemy lines.
Mm-hmm.
So in World War II, we had some of those, and this follows one company, and they've literally, episode 2, they drop in on D-Day. Like, that's how it starts.
Mm-hmm.
But that's episode 2. The entire episode 1, there's no combat. What it is their training. They're at Camp Currahee in Georgia, dealing with this, the superior officer who seems sadistic to them, making them run up and down this hill all these times. Like, it's terrible. But it turns out as you watch the movie, and the men would say this later, that if they hadn't gone through such a grueling training, then they would not have been able to handle what was in front of them. They had grueling days in front of them, on the Eastern Front in the winter without winter gear, like freezing. They needed that training. So here's the point. Pro-lifers are in that place too. We need to do training. We need to get in boot camp and learn that there are some methods that are more effective than others. And we have so many experiences of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And we just want to let everyone know what we've been learning.
All right. I agree. And I want to get into that. And I think there is a lot to learn. And there's a lot that we do wrong. But I want to just take one more bite at the apple.
Yeah, please.
So, and I understand, want to be open-minded. And I understand, and again, I can think on every issue. I agree. I could debate every issue and say, okay, I don't see it exactly the way you do, but I can understand why, you think this way.
Yeah.
But I'm right on killing of babies. I'm just right. And so how do I how do I
How do you
not
get around
think?
that?
Yeah.
It seems it would be super weird if pro-choice people thought it was okay to kill babies. Like
Mhm.
very, very few pro-choice people actually believe it's okay to kill babies. There are two really big disagreements between pro-life and pro-choice people. And really, I think only two. We don't disagree about whether poverty is a bad thing or whether rape is a bad thing. Like all these things, like we have a lot of common ground, but we disagree on two big things. One is fetal personhood. The unborn baby, as where you're calling it a baby, that entity in the womb, is that the same kind of thing as you and I? And not just scientifically. Is it philosophically a kind of thing that morally matters, like you and I clearly do, right? So they might disagree on that and think that you don't start morally mattering until later in pregnancy. Like they would just say that, look, at some point you become valuable. You have a potential person in the womb, but for a while the lights haven't come on yet. And so it's a totally different thing for them. Now, there's good and bad arguments for that view, and we can get into how to respond. Then on the other side, you're going to have people who, again, take a more bodily autonomy approach. And that approach basically says, you are right, Scott. You're right that abortion kills living human persons, but it ought to still be legal, and here's why. Because we should not force people to be hooked up to other people. So there's like a famous thought experiment. So let's spend a couple of minutes here since you brought us here. Let's just
Okay.
I don't want to give people the hard thing without giving a little bit of an answer. But the thought experiment would go that you wake up in a hospital bed. You didn't go to sleep there, so you're freaking out. There's a tube coming out of your body into a man in a coma in the bed next to you. The head of the hospital rushes in and says, oh, good, you're awake. Oh, let me catch you up. I'm so sorry. This is so unjust. Okay. That guy, the guy in a coma, is a world-famous violinist with a kidney problem. You were kidnapped by the Society of Music Lovers, who somehow found out that you're a kidney match, and they kidnapped you both, they hooked you up, and then they left you here. And here's the thing. I'm so sorry. This is so unjust. But that violinist, he's a person. He has what you would call maybe the right to life. And so we can't unplug you or he'll die. But here's the good news. You only have to be plugged in for 9 months. And then we unplug you and everyone can go their merry ways. Most pro-life people would agree that you should not be handcuffed to the bed, that there should not be a violinist amendment to the Constitution that says that this is the way that we will, affect bodily autonomy. Now, there's really great responses to both of those differences. But hopefully people can get a sense of, okay, it might be hard for people to convince you that abortion doesn't kill a thing. You couldn't convince me that abortion doesn't kill something. You could, in theory, convince me that it ought to be legal because of trying to think about, like, this is a situation where you have this kind of rights case where you're trying to do your best to weigh both the rights of the woman and the child, and it's complicated.
Yeah, it is. And I'm thinking about your analogy. It's interesting, and we could spend quite a bit of time on that. I mean, except in the cases of rape and incest, there are some decisions that are made.
Yes.
That there weren't decisions that were made in your analogy. But
that
anyway,
is one of the best. That's one of the best responses. Is the responsibility objection? Is that I do believe. I believe you're right. I think it's morally relevant when people engage in an act that they know might result in the creation of an innocent child that they would then owe compensation to later. So I am in agree with you. That is really effective. It won't cover, as you said, 100% of the abortions, but that's really powerful and definitely one of the arguments that we teach.
Yeah. So let's get back to when it comes up or, how you broach the topic. It seems like in 2024, we as a society are not allowed to disagree on anything. It's
people
not
losing friends left and right.
Right. And it's just not okay. Yeah. So we just don't bring it up. We hide our beliefs, our values, that sort of thing. I'll be honest. You know what? There are times when I will do that.
Yeah.
Just to maintain the peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I probably should have spoken up. So then there are effective ways you're saying that we can have a productive conversation without breaking out into a shouting match.
Yes. So like a lot of it has to do with how you start. And I think starting the conversation in most situations is probably the hardest part. Like if we work with a lot of clubs on college campuses, for example, it's easy for them to get into conversations. They just have to set up a table asking the right question, and they will get a bunch of people having conversations. For adults like you and me who aren't going to college, and like it's a little bit more difficult. I believe that the best opportunity you're going to have to change a pro-choice person's mind is if they are a friend and local to you, and you're able to go out to eat or grab coffee on a semi-regular basis. I think that is like best case scenario. There are so many stories of people who the only reason they were able to change their mind, to get over all of the hurdles that were in their head between point A and point Z, they needed to be able to have multiple conversations with someone that they trusted. That's why if it's a friend, at least like Scott, your friends know that you are not pro-life because you hate women. Like, hopefully they at least understand that, right? And so they might take your pro-life arguments more seriously than they would take me if they just like heard me on the radio or something because I'm a stranger. They know that hopefully that you're a good person and that you're thoughtful and that you're doing your best. And if you are, again, so that you are open-minded and interested in learning from them too and hearing the best arguments that their side has to offer, people are willing to do that. So I could start it this way. I could basically reach out to a friend, might like shoot an email, and just be like, hey, you want to do something weird? You know how like it's really hard for people to talk about things that they disagree on? I'm wanting to change that. I've noticed in my life that I have too many friends who all believe the same politically. And I've been thinking a lot about the abortion topic. It's been in the news a lot lately. And I want to spend some time talking to a pro-choice person that I respect, that I can learn from, and try to get outside of confirmation bias land. And if you're open to hearing from me, I would love to, have a conversation back and forth. But like, that's the kind of thing that people aren't doing. And I think if everyone were doing that, our society would be such a better place.
Yeah. And you know what? This is important. Some people might be listening and say, well, why even bring it up? Let's just avoid it. It's kind of like we started with, I mean, we're going to start to see, post Dobbs now, we're going to see this issue coming up in every state where there are political battles where they try to codify abortion into state constitutions. And so these conversations are going to have to go on.
They're more important than at least in the last 20 years. Like you actually can have an impact on abortion laws by changing minds in your state. That hasn't been the case for a really long time. So let's get really good at it. Let's not just assume that we are like, oh, it's super simple. Like, let's get in. We want to tell you what the really smart pro-choice people have to say and how to confidently refute their ideas.
All right, let's role play a little bit. I'm the pro-choicer. All right.
Awesome.
All right. So we'll just jump into it. And, Josh, look, it's my body. So it's my choice. I get to choose what happens with my body, my choice.
Yeah. So that's excellent. I'm so glad that you brought that up. That is, I think, one of the most popular pro-choice ideas. In fact, that phrase could mean at least 4 different arguments. So I really want to make sure I don't strawman you accidentally or anything like that. So could you either flesh out what you mean by my body, my choice, or if you would like, I'd be happy to sort of give you multiple choice and you could kind of tell me, like, I just want clarity. Clarity is our friend, and I don't want to misconstrue your argument.
Well, I should be able to choose what happens to my body. I don't think your religion should be put on my body. I think, any decision about my health or anything that happens to my body is my decision and mine alone.
Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful. So there's some things in there that we actually agree with. I don't believe that my religious views should be able to affect your body either. I don't think that if I had views about like your lifestyle, let's say your sexual lifestyle, and I had views based on the Christian church that you don't share, like, I'm not forcing that on you. And so I don't think it's not accurate to say that we want to completely control all of that stuff. And it's not a religious thing for me. It's a scientific and philosophical thing for me. I think this is a really complicated philosophical question. And my body, my choice really gets into the can quickly get us into the weeds of some of the most interesting parts of like what the really clever pro-choice philosophers have to say.
All right. let's go another route. Well, Josh, this is healthcare. This is
Mhm.
healthcare for women, and if you deny my access to abortion, you're denying proper healthcare for women.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, that would depend on how you define healthcare. So, obviously, pro-life and pro-choice people think really differently, right? Like that's almost a tautology. That's like we just kind of know that, right? And so we think really differently. And so I try to help pro-life people a lot of times to better understand where pro-choice people are coming from, to really get into their shoes. But I also want pro-choice people to be able to do that for pro-life people. And so imagine that you believe that abortion was actually killing a baby. Like that's really what they thought.
But it's just
Um,
not, Josh. It's not.
Sure. Okay, we could get there. If it's not, then I'm on your side. Like I'm pro-choice if abortion doesn't kill, what some would call a baby. So that's that. Like, let's go there. Why do you think that it's not a baby?
It's not. It's just a clump of cells.
What does that mean to you when you say clump of cells? Like,
Well, it can't think. It doesn't have emotions.
mhm.
It can't even live on its own.
And what time period are we talking about? Are we talking about like first trimester? Are you talking about how late into pregnancy do you think people should be able to have abortions?
Oh, until viability.
Okay, a lot of people are using that line. That's interesting. So would you agree with me as the pro-choice person? Would we have this common ground that abortion should be? You think abortion should be legal for the first 20-ish weeks, and then you would be okay with it being banned after that. I'm assuming. And how do you feel about just because I like finding common ground, I just love to ask you a few quick more. How do you feel about abortions in the case of sex selection? Like, there's cultures where sometimes if they find out they're having a girl, they will abort the girl so that they can have a boy. Like, how do you feel about that?
I don't like that. Now, however, if
Hmm.
there's some sort of uh, massive deformity, or if the fetus has
Hmm.
some sort of fatal disease or something, then I think that should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, certainly, certainly. We can take all of that into consideration, but even if we did, that is like we could have a whole conversation about how we got to treat disabled people and the best ways to think about that and how to handle the tragic, horrible situation that parents go through when they have a child that is not going to survive the entire pregnancy or maybe not survive long after birth. I certainly don't think that we should kill them. I think we should give them palliative care, love them as well as we can until they pass naturally. But again, that's not most abortions, though. Most abortions are taking place in the first trimester for socioeconomic reasons. So, if you would agree with me, so I guess maybe if I could just ask you a quick question,
Uh huh.
is why do you want to control women's bodies?
I don't want. I think every woman should be able to control their own bodies.
Yeah, except you don't, because earlier you said that after 20 weeks it should be able to be made illegal. So you definitely think that there are some cases when we should be able to control women's bodies.
Well, unless it's unless the woman's health or um, mental, emotional, or physical health is in danger, and then I think it should be still be an option.
Yeah, but so just I know that there is a lot of disagreement on this, and I would be happy to give you the pro-choice sources on this. But there are a lot of abortions in the second and third trimester that are not done because there's a problem with the mom or the baby.
By the
They are
way,
done with a healthy baby that is in a healthy mom.
let's just pause here in case
Yeah.
anybody's tuning into the podcast, and just remind people that
What
that
happened
we're
to Scott?
we're role playing here at this point. In case my boss checks in, it's like, oh my word, what happened to Scott? We're just role playing, and I'm the pro-choice person. All right, so back to it.
Yeah.
So, okay, what your response to me was? So we were
I'm.
talking about.
Why do you want to control women's bodies after 20 weeks?
Well, it's after the baby is viable,
Hmm.
then it's a person. But that's not until late into pregnancy. Then it's another person.
Yeah. So right now that takes place around 20 to 24 weeks, give or take. But as technology grows, that line changes. In fact, that actually makes this, I think, of all the options that you could choose for reasons that you don't think that the that the entity in the womb, whatever you want to call it, the human embryo or fetus here. The reason that you don't think it's a baby, I think this is the kind of strangest one to pick because you pick the only moving target. If you put a woman in a first world country on a transatlantic flight and send her to certain parts of the world, then she's going to suddenly go from having a viable baby to a not viable baby. That gets metaphysically really weird, especially if the plane turns around. Like, you want to avoid an episodic problem, as philosophers say. And so I think it would be weird to say that you become a person, but then you can also lose that really quickly just because of technology or some other sort of outside force.
So what happens usually at this point of the conversation is emotion often takes over.
Yes.
I'm sure you've experienced that.
Yes. We're out of the role play now. Is that right?
Yes, we're out of the pausing the role play right now.
Checking. Yeah.
That's usually what will happen. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this.
Yes.
They'll just resort to name calling or something like that. How do you kind of recenter or reorient the conversation back to where it needs to be?
That's such a great question, and I have so many thoughts on this. So, a lot of times it depends. So it's a case by case basis kind of a situation for me. I definitely think that there are conversations that you ought to be willing to end. I wrote an article a long time ago that says you should be willing to graciously end unproductive conversations. So, for example, if you're talking to someone who's really closed-minded and has demonstrated that for a while, then I don't know what the point is of talking to a closed-minded person. They're not, nothing's changing, right? And there's other factors. If they're being really abusive, especially like over, after a little while, asking, if they're continuing to be abusive, there's reasons to end the conversation. Like, probably pro-life Christians should care about self-care and boundaries. If someone's getting kind of upset, like a lot of times, the louder that they get, the quieter you should get. Like, there are reasons why they are feeling this upset. As passionate as you are about the subject of brutally killing babies and abortions, they also might be very passionate about the subject of believing, if you listen to a lot of pro-choice sources, that pro-lifers are going to get women killed all over America because they're not going to be able to deal with their ectopic pregnancies and situations like that. Like, there's a lot of really scary rhetoric about pro-lifers out there right there. And so a lot of times people just need to take a break. Like, I noticed that recently in a conversation I was having with a friend of mine who is trying to influence the way that I think about something. At some point, I went quickly from loving it to overwhelmed. Like, there's just like so much information. It's like I needed time to process. I basically told her, you now have like a negative return on, like, like if the longer we go, the worse effects are going to have. So like, let's take some time. Like, pro-choice people need that too. So if they're getting upset, then I want to give them the opportunity to, like, let's maybe end this. I also want to listen to them. If they're willing to share with me why they're upset, Scott, they might be upset because they had an abortion. And they feel like what you're actually saying to them is that they're a murderer.
Yeah, right.
And you're not. Hopefully, you'll be able to explain the distinction, like why you don't think of women who have abortions as murderers. But it's not weird that they would come to that conclusion. And so sometimes it's just a matter of just like, what would you be willing to share with me? Like, if someone said they were post-abortive to me, I'll say, like, you don't have to share anything with me. This is completely your private business. But if there's anything that you would like me as the pro-lifer to know about your experience, I will listen and not interrupt. Like, that kind of thing. Like, just make a safe space for that.
You just said something, though, that that triggered, and I know this is something else that you talk to people about. And let's turn the tables a little bit.
Yeah.
And that is talking to, how shall we say, those who are fervently pro-life. And you talked about, talking to women who have had abortion and calling them baby murderer killers and things like that. Yeah. Maybe go too far the other way.
Yep.
What are some things you have seen go wrong there?
Yeah, it's a great. So I actually have a whole speech called 9 Faulty Pro-Life Arguments and Tactics. So we could do this as long as you want. But like, I'll give you an example of an argument and a tactic. So like a tactic is going to be anything that makes it less likely for people to want to talk to you. Like, if you're a sidewalk counselor, especially, like, that you want to say very inviting things, welcoming things. So we have an online course and we give some suggestions on how to do that. But you've got a short window there to try to convince someone to come to you. So everything you're doing, everything you're wearing, everything you're holding, if you're speaking through a bullhorn or not, all of those choices matter in making you approachable or not. And so I say tactically, I see a lot of pro-life people they get so passionate. And understandably, we know what abortion is. Abortion is one of the worst human rights injustices in the history of mankind, and we're really trying to help our society to figure that out, but they haven't yet. And so so you can get people that become so passionate they sort of get in their own way. They're well-meaning, but they're off-putting, and we don't want to be that, especially post-ops. An example of an argument that we should never, ever make, because it's a terrible argument, both pragmatically and philosophically, we call it the Beethoven argument. Think of all the Beethovens who've been aborted and all the symphonies, all the different, the people who could have cured cancer sometimes. Like, there's all these different, variations of it. And it is a terrible argument. First of all, it works both ways. Yes, of course, there are babies who've been aborted who could have grown up to help cure cancer or be the next Hans Zimmer or John Williams. But they also could have been another rapist or something like that. Like, that happens too. And so that plays both ways. More importantly, it functionally is more like a pro-choice argument. This is going to get a little bit philosophical for 60 seconds. Just buckle in with me. This is not too hard. But the part of the disagreement between pro-life and pro-choice people is whether human value is intrinsic or instrumental. Pro-choice people think that your value is instrumental, usually, meaning that your value comes from the kinds of things that you can do functionally and or the way that you can benefit the people around you or society. That is not the pro-life view. The pro-life view is that humans are valuable because of the kinds of things they are. They are just valuable because of the kinds of things they are, not what they do functionally. So when you start saying, well, abortion has killed these wonderful people, then it's sort of implying that our value is instrumental and we don't want to be making that case.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. You said something when we were role playing I loved. Yeah. You said, I want to find common ground.
Yeah.
I loved that. That is so good because it's sort of disarming. It just says, you know what? I want to agree with you. I want to find areas where we agree, and then you immediately go there. I love that.
Yes.
That's a great tool.
Yes, this is so important. So my friend Steve Wagner has written a book on this called Common Ground Without Compromise. And it's just one of the best things in a conversation. They are not expecting, if they are only watching MSNBC all day or Young Turks or something like that, they are expecting a very different dynamic than hopefully you will have with them. So you get to play good cop, bad cop with the caricature of the pro-life movement that's in their head. You're going to be so different than what they expect that they will eventually, potentially even become intrigued by wanting to know what you think. I get pro-choice people asking me why I think the things that I think. They're asking me to tell them. And that happens because, one, I'm finding a lot of common ground, as much connection as I can. Anything they say that I can agree on, I am finding some way, either verbally or through body language, non-verbally, to show agreement. I'm also literally, because it is so powerful, it's most powerful part of a conversation probably is the common ground part, is I will go looking for the common ground. Really actively. So for example, I have political views all over the spectrum. I have some political views that are that are on the right. I've got some that are on the left. I've got some that are in the middle. I'm on nobody's team. Nobody likes me. I'm everyone. I make everyone mad, right? So I know that I have a few political views that probably a college student I'm talking to on the left is going to agree with. I will find ways to get into that because then they are just so surprised to be talking to a pro-lifer who doesn't just agree with everything Ben Shapiro says. And I want them to understand, yes, I am multifaceted. I'm trying to figure out what to believe about all of these issues. And if I'm wrong about abortion, I want you to help me find that out because truth matters. Truth matters more than being comfortable. So I would rather be uncomfortable and believe true things than to be a comfortable person believing false things. So we are on a journey. You are on the same team with this person. You're on a team trying to find truth together. You are standing shoulder to shoulder, staring at this problem together, whether it's abortion or what to think about religion or whatever. And
Man.
you're staring at this problem, talking about it, and hopefully by the end of the process, which hopefully like might take years, you might have years of conversations if this is your friend. And it takes a lot of people years to change their minds about something this difficult and deep. Like most people don't change their minds in one day. It just doesn't psychologically. It doesn't happen that often. And so you're going to have time with this person to hopefully be able to see them become, pro-life ultimately.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, but I think you've answered it, and let me see if here's the answer I think you're going to tell me, but you tell me if I'm right.
Okay.
So should the goal of the conversation be persuasion or understanding? And I think you're going to say understanding.
So if I had to choose between those two things, I would choose understanding, but I would say it differently. So I this is the way that I've said it publicly, is that I think my goal in the conversation is not necessarily to make them pro-life or to convert them to Christianity. My goal is to love them as best as I can. Now, that's complicated because people are complicated. Like, can we stop treating people like formulas for a second and remember that people have different needs on different days? So when I'm talking to someone, I am in my head trying to figure out how to be as loving as I can to this person. If I feel like they need to hear a good pro-life argument, I am happy to help them with that. I am there for them. If they want to talk about why, I believe what I do religiously, I'm happy to go there. If they want to talk about something else, I'm generally willing to go there so that we can, again, be on that journey together. So loving people is complicated, and in every conversation is filled with difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing. We say this all the time. Every conversation is a series of difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing, and so we are doing our best. I make mistakes all the time, but we're doing our best and we're paying a lot of attention to the impact that we're having on the other person. And we get really nerdy about psychology and philosophy and try to figure out what's working now, not what worked 20 years ago. Gen Z processes data psychologically really differently than Gen X does. So we are really interested at Equal Rights Institute in what is working right now. What is helping young pro-choice people right now to become pro-life more than any other argument or technique? And that is what we're going to teach people.
EqualRightsInstitute.com. They've got all kinds of great tools available. If you want more, you want access to some of these tools, you guys have speakers available. Yep. I would strongly encourage you to go to the website, see what they have available to there.
Podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's online courses, there's TikTok videos. If you're into the really short form content, we're even on TikTok now. In fact, we reach way more people on TikTok than anywhere else. It's crazy. But we have all the things. We have 200 articles plus on our blog. However you want to take in information, we are there for you. If you want to watch speaking videos, a lot of people like watching speech videos. Go to our YouTube channel, find some of my speeches, and you can quickly kind of get a sense of who we are and what are the main things that we teach.
You want to be equipped when you have the conversations, and this is where you can be equipped. EqualRightsInstitute.com. Josh Brahm, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was great talking to you, Scott.
Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to Dear Jane. Let's make sure this pro-life podcast gets to as many people as possible. Hit that subscribe button. You can hear Dear Jane every week on your podcast platform of choice, and you can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook. I'm your host, Scott Baker. For our producer, Kate Ewell, and our editor, Jacob McCormick, thank you for listening to Dear Jane.